Morning, folks. Get rid of my reading glasses this morning. It's kind of hard to believe that I no longer wear glasses. I haven't had surgery. All I wear is the readers. But I definitely have to wear the readers. I got away without wearing the readers for a while. Oh, it's Dr. John Taylor Kent here. It's the 18th of October. Middle of the morning, about 2 a.m. Nice and cool outside. The weather's beautiful. A little bit windier last few winters than usual is typical here. We got something serious to talk about. I'm not very happy with the Supreme Court. The lack of wisdom on the Supreme Court, the undermining of our society by our Supreme Court really astounds me. When our masters have no other way to affect our laws and to change things up and to force their ways upon us, then they turn to the Supreme Court to legislate from the bench. Now, one of the things that's kind of stuck in my head also is that there's a precedent for jailing Supreme Court justices. And Abraham Lincoln did it to John Jay. And so it's been done before. Could you imagine right now if our president was to put our Chief Justice into a jail, into prison, to hold him in contempt, or to... I don't remember why John Jay was put in jail or in prison, but Abraham Lincoln was upset he wasn't getting what he wanted. Basically, we don't have the checks and balances we used to have, and my topic, what's on my heart, is why the United States of America must go away, must disappear, must cease existing. The number one reason why the United States of America must go away is because we're in severe violation of God's law. Now, whether you know it or not, we're the people that made the covenant at Mount Sinai to agree. We agreed at Mount Sinai to live by those laws. Now, most people don't realize this because they think that, well, we are just white pasty folks. We have no diversity or culture or roots. So we are kind of wandering as an unrooted people. We have forgotten who we are. We've lost our identity because there's an evil group that has undermined that actively, proactively for thousands of years. And that's so that they can dominate us. And at this point, one of the tenets in the Bible is you're not allowed to have someone who is not your brother, not one of your brothers, rule over you. So in other words, if you're going to have a king, the king has to be from among your own people. Can't be an outsider. Now, there was a competing culture at the same time the Israelite culture was going on. And that was the devil's culture, basically. And I mean that quite literally. I know you're going to say, he believes in the devil. What's wrong with him? Well, we have a competing culture that's actually subverting our mainstream culture right now. And that culture came from the southern part of Israel. It came from Mount Seir, also known as Mount Edom. And these are the descendants of Esau and his Canaanite wives. Now, if we read the Bible carefully, we find out that Yahweh warns the Israelites about 5 times. This isn't just merely a double witness. This is an ironclad rule, a law, a principle, an axiom, a way by which you live or you die. And that was, you do not intermarry with the people of the land. And you're going to say, well, what's wrong with that? Why are they so damn prejudiced? Well, the fallen angels were cast to heaven. And so they intermingled with mankind, and produced a hybrid. And they were real spoilers. And those were the Canaanites. Those were the people of the land. They were descendants of Cain. Who was Cain? Well, read the Bible. You'll find out he was a murderer right from the get-go. And you'll find out that he was fathered by the father of all lies, Gadriel. That name's not in the Bible in a certain sense. In another sense, it's pervasive throughout the Bible. From Gadriel, we shortened the name to get his nickname, Gad, God. And so we put God throughout the Bible, which is basically the short nickname form of the fallen angel that seduced Eve, fathered Cain, who planted the weeds among the good seed. So when you read the Bible and Yeshua, the Messiah, who most of your Bibles will say is Jesus the Christ, he'll tell you what happened. And he told you that an enemy came along and planted the seed, the weeds among the good seed, the tares among the wheat. And he also gave you some other principles that were important, like you're not supposed to go yanking up the tares before the harvest time. Well, we're supposed to let them grow up among us, and they're choking us off. They're actually genociding us at this particular point. They run the place. So they're going to genocide us, and they're working on it. They're working on it quite a bit. I just watched a testimony by Dr. Fleming, and he testifies to the fact that this virus was created in a lab. Well, okay. He testifies to the fact that it's a weapon. Didn't happen in nature. It's a violation of international law. And yet, nobody's being charged. We're not allowed to talk about it. That's because the bad guys have such a chokehold across the whole planet. They're involved in all the governments, especially in the United States government. We're not the good guys anymore. We've been controlled by the bad guys and used by them for more than 100 years. Anyway, we're scheduled to go away. We're violating several principles. And if you read the Ten Commandments, and if you actually read the Bible enough, they start to unfold to you so that you understand there's a little bit more to them than what is taught in the mainstream churches. And so by violating the natural law, we disappear. We suffer the curses for disobedience. That's what those sections are entitled in my NIV study Bible. The other section that is in contrast in comparison to that are the blessings for obedience. It talks about victory in battle. It talks about, the fields growing, being productive. It talks about, rain, natural consequences that this planet was set up to yield to us. And there's natural consequences for good behavior. And you may think, well, that shouldn't matter. We should be able to do what we want, by God. By golly, we should be able to do anything we want because we're free. And that's all that matters. Well, what matters is that you don't violate natural law. Because when you violate natural law, you suffer. There's a wonderful book out there published in 1934, one of the most important books ever written. It's up there among the top 10. And it's called On Sex and Culture. And it was published by a social psychologist or social psychiatrist, I believe he was. Unwin, Unwin. It was his life's work. He actually finished writing it in 1932. However, because it was his life's work and he wanted to make absolutely certain, absolutely right, that his conclusions were the right conclusions, he waited 2 years before he published it. So it was published formally in 1934. The work was completed in 1932. In his research, he looked at all previous civilizations, all records, everything available to him. And he came to the conclusion that, and I know you ladies are going to be very upset when you hear this, but he came to the conclusion that once a civilization allowed female sexuality to become unbridled, those are the terms he preferred. Once female sexuality became unbridled, a civilization disappeared. A civilization was doomed. It disappeared from the face of the earth. So in those cultures in which things changed, the morals changed, everything changed. And by the way, my grandmother, who graduated Mount Holyoke College in 1917, for you ladies who think that, you were always repressed, she was a brilliant woman, very loved, very well known. I'm so glad that I visited her as often as I did and I had the conversations I had with her. Wish the men in my family had been as talkative, had taken the time, but she took the time to talk with me. She explained to me the principles of psychology. I didn't become a psychologist because of her, because of those conversations. I look back at those and think those conversations just happened. And when free love started up, what was the year? I'm trying to put this in the year. I was visiting my grandmother, and the morals, the mores were changing. And this is in probably, I want to say 68, but probably closer to 70. 70, 75, 80, somewhere along there, between 68 and 78, 82. My grandmother and I visited and I spent time with her. My grandfather had already passed, and so she was up there and I was visiting, and my other part of the family needed a little bit of attention as well, and I was going to school in Massachusetts, so I went ahead and went north to home to New Hampshire. And we talked about free love, and I guess I was touting it, how it was wonderful. And little did I know. And my grandmother was very upset, and she was always a lady. She was quite the lady. And she says, "Oh my, oh my." And I asked her what the problem was. And she said to me, "Women are the backbone of our morality." And I had no idea how important that was to the country, how important that was to the nation and the survival of the nation, the health and welfare of the nation. And she told me women were the backbone of our morality. That's what they taught her at college. And basically what it came down to is that women were responsible for upholding the morality. It's like a backbone supporting the body. You don't think about it, you don't realize it's there until you have some problems with it. And women were the safeguards of our morality. And when we loosened up those morals, the mores, the social mores, and went for free love, my dad did have a talk with me, and this was an important thing too. He was lecturing me about free love and the hippie movement, and I was I was growing up at the tail end of the hippie movement. And as I look at it, I really feel fortunate to have been at the tail end and not in the mainstream. I almost went to Woodstock. Yeah, I'm that old, all right. I was 15 years old and I was in Kansas and I was going to hitchhike across the country. I wanted to do it, but I was too young, too small. And back then they would have picked you up in a heartbeat. They wouldn't have hesitated. Today you could get away with it, not back then. So I didn't participate in Woodstock, and I kind of wished I had, but then again I'm so glad I didn't. Who knows what might have happened then. But my dad was talking to me, lecturing me, and he said free love was too expensive. It's probably one of the smartest things my dad ever said. I mean, the wisdom of that statement. Free love is too expensive. I don't know how he came up with it, but it's an incredible statement. It's an incredible adage. It's quite the axiom. And it's true. It cost us our families, our homes, our marriages, and ultimately it's going to cost us our nation. So I was a little upset when the Supreme Court decided to legalize homosexual marriage, gay marriage. I was upset because we were having enough trouble with marriages. Heterosexuals were. I had some gay friends. And they were nice people. And all I could think of was, why wish that mess upon them? This is horrible. They're going to be in and out of the courts. It's going to cost them a lot of money. It's going to be a lot more stress and strain. Just let them live the way they're living. Leave them alone. Let them stay outside of society slightly, on the fringes of society, so they wouldn't have to suffer these consequences and the stuff the rest of us were going through. Because about then, divorce was getting so popular, everybody was getting divorced and married. It was really pretty bad. And of course, there I was at the very end of the generation that actually was getting married for life and staying together. And believe me, when I'm out in society, or when I've been out the last decade or so, one of the things that never ceases to admire me is when you have an older couple who cling to each other, who go everywhere together, who won't let the other one out of their sight, and who are watching each other's backs. Because when we get older, we need a little bit more protection. A little bit more comfort is good too. And it's only those folks who got married and stayed well married who have that. And that's just a wonderful thing. You know, it is wonderful that they have that companionship all the way till the end. And it's sad when one of them passes and one of them loses the other. And in case you're wondering, what we've discovered is that when a couple has been married for a long time, like 50 years, when a couple has been married that long, when one of them passes away, the other one usually doesn't hang around too long. They usually pass away within a year of the other one. I guess life is no fun anymore. They've lost their best friend, they've lost their partner, and they're lost without them. And there's something to be said that they lose the will to live, that their spirit diminishes. And so we find that people that have been married more than 50 years or more than 40 years, at this point, a 20-year marriage is quite a success in a long time. But those people that were married for 50 or 60 years, or like my parents were, how long were they married for? It was getting towards 70 years. They were married for 60, 66, 67 years. They made it. Mom passed first. Dad actually survived more than a year. He went about 14 months. And I opened my mouth saying, Dad, you're doing pretty good. I was pretty proud of him. I was happy. And he had been fishing. And he told me I called too much. So I think in his spirit somewhere he knew it was his time, or he was just tired. And he had lost a lot of mass. he had shrunk down, and he was lying to me on the phone, telling me he had gained 5 pounds when he had actually lost probably another 20. And when I saw the last pictures of him out fishing, I cried. Looked at it. I told my brother, I says, wow, what did he weigh? And my brother says about 145 pounds, 150 pounds. This is a man that weighed over 200 pounds most of his life. He was about 6'1". And he had shrunk down quite a bit too. That happens to us as we age. My aunt was a tall woman. She was a good-looking, healthy woman most of her life. She shrunk quite a bit towards the end as well. And I've lost some height myself. So all of you out there wondering about aging, yes, you lose some of your stature. In many ways, I guess. And I know a lot of you out there are busy mocking me because I'm grandpa to you. Well, I wish I was somebody's grandpa, but I'm not. So if you want me to be your grandpa, then listen to my videos, subscribe, and above all, buy my Bible. It's the best Bible on the face of the earth to date. It is the foundations of Western civilization, and it may save Western civilization. Yes, it may save. We can turn to it. Now, Unwin, who wrote Sex and Culture, came to 2 conclusions. And the first was that in every civilization in which women's sexuality became unbridled, that civilization was doomed and disappeared from the face of the earth. It did not last. They're all gone. And he said the other thing that he had determined studying all of these is that once female sexuality had become unbridled, you never could put the cork back in it again. You never could, well, you ladies are going to say, oppress them again. So basically, once it's out, you can't put it back in the box. Once that genie's out of the bottle, you cannot put it back in. It's not going to go back in. That's what Unwin's conclusions were. And he wrote a massive book to come to those simple conclusions. Now, he published that in 1934. He was positive he was right in his research. And you can get the book. I think it's in the public domain. You can look it up on the internet and download the PDF. It is a massive PDF. I believe there's about 750 pages in the book. Quite a facsimile, quite a photo of it, of the old pages. I urge you to do it. I suggest that you do it. If you're inclined and you're a reader, go for it. Get into it. And report back to the rest of us other findings that you have from Unwin. So that's the problem we have, is that female sexuality has become unbridled. And as a result, our culture, our civilization is doomed. It will disappear. And I know that's a horrible thing to say. And I know it's a profound thing to say. And I know most of you hearing me say this you're not going to agree with that. You're going to disagree and you're going to want to argue about it. Well, I figured this out. And this is kind of a tough one, and I guess it only takes me, Dr. Kent, to come up with such an idea. Unwin published 2 years before. A gentleman came to power who put the genie back in the bottle. He was a great man, and he was so great, and he did such a good job against the evil ones that the evil ones have had to revile him, and they never gave him a fair shake, and they don't represent him fairly, honestly. They lie about everything. They lie about themselves and their roots. They lie about us. They've changed all of our institutions. They censored all of the literature to hide their presence here on the earth. Read the Bible. It's in the Bible. The Bible will free you up. So, that gentleman was Adolf Hitler. And he came to power with the National Socialist Party. They did not call themselves Nazis or the Nazi Party. That's a word that was fabricated after the war by a Jewish fellow named Conrad, I believe was his first name. I don't remember his last name. I've seen pictures of him. well-dressed fellow. Of course, everybody was well-dressed back then. We all wore suits. We all wore hats. It was just part of what a man wore. Uh, so he invented that term to deride them. And so they never called themselves that. And to me, that's the real N word. It should not be used. And I got people running around who are who are part of the American Nazi Party. And I think that was one of the most stupid things that guy Rockwell ever did, was call himself that. Because it's a derogatory term. It is a little bit on the mellifluous side, in that it sounds similar to a word in German that means nuts, that they used in Bavaria to refer to crazy people. So it was a derisive term, a terrible, a racist term, horrible term. And I don't like using it because there was really no such thing. Or was there? And we don't know what it stands for. Why is that? Well, the man who explained to the world what it meant is that the NA part stood for the National Socialist Party, which the Germans called themselves, which Adolf Hitler started. I think he started it. And the ZI stood for the Zionist International. Yeah, the two formed an amalgam. And I know you're going to say, oh, you're crazy. They killed 6 million Jews. Did they? Did they? Were there even 6 million that could be killed? No, there weren't. As a matter of fact, there were more Jews alive at the end of World War II than at the beginning of World War II. They didn't have the physical means to exterminate those people. They didn't have the physical means to dispose of the bodies. We have no evidence. We have a real bad hoax that was pulled upon us. The bodies were pulled out of Dresden. Now, in my travels, I talked to some wonderful men, and I cannot remember who told me this story, but I can tell you that the year was 2011, 2012. It was 2012. I was in Indiana, out in Amish country, at a little church out in the countryside. One of the claims to fame for this little church is that Fidel Castro, who was a famous athlete at the time, a baseball player, and an American in good standing, I guess, he showed up and gave a speech either at that building, in that particular church, when it was owned and occupied by another group, or he did that across the street at the town hall there. I don't remember. Anyway, we're sitting there after service, and we had a great time because we talked about the Bible, and we were trying to understand the Bible, and those were wonderful times. We talked for hours until the sun set. Service was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then afterwards we would have a meal, and then we would talk and hang out, usually outside. What I found out was that there was a man who was he was a commissioned officer, an NCO, a warrant officer, a little bit different. Not really quite a commissioned officer, but not quite a formal commissioned officer. I can't remember what a warrant officer is. It just is a bit different than regular Army. And this warrant officer was in Army intelligence. And he was assigned to go to Dresden after the firebombing. And his job was to take a flatbed train to Dresden. And his orders were to load up the skeletons, the corpses, the piles of bodies onto these flatbed railroad cars. And then he was to take them to these different places which became known as concentration camps. By the way, the British had the real concentration camps, and they were in South Africa. And were during the Boer War, about 1905. The British invented the concentration camp. And those were real concentration camps where they really genocided those people. There's contradictory evidence on what we call the concentration camps, which might be more properly called work camps. But that's for another day. He hauled these things as an intelligence officer, these corpses, and piled them up. And when he got to one place and piled up a bunch of them, they had him kneel in front of the pile of corpses and took his picture. He didn't know what they were going to use it for. He didn't know he was going to be used. And then that photograph of him in front of those horrible, horrible corpses from Dresden. Remember, about 400,000 people died in the firebombing in Dresden, which actually is probably about the same number as died in all of those work camps combined. You call them concentration camps, I'll call them work camps. But I'm talking about the same thing. The key characteristic of those places, by the way, is that they were on railroad lines. And why was that important? Well, most people say it was important so that they could haul it, so they could haul bodies there. Well, actually what happened is they were at the railroad lines, and they were at the places where the gauges of the trains changed, and they couldn't run the same trains. They had to run the other trains the other part of the tracks. So each one of those places was like a station where they just changed trains. And so passengers or goods would have to go from one train to the other train. There were different widths for the tracks, different widths for the trains as well. So that's one of the key characteristics of those. So this warrant officer was shocked. I believe his picture was on the cover of Life magazine. Could have been Look, it could have been Time, but I'm pretty sure that it was Life. And he didn't give permission for that. They never told him what they were going to do with it. And he, being in good faith, didn't appreciate the fact that they were lying and using him to perpetuate this lie. So he protested. He said he wanted it taken off. He wanted a retraction. And of course, the powers that be weren't going to have any of that. They weren't going to listen to this guy. So he resigned his commission. He resigned and went home and went to Elkhart, Indiana, and he went to work in, I think they were furniture factories. Perhaps they were RV factories, but he went to work, I think, in a furniture factory. And that's how he spent the rest of his life, was in the furniture factory. I didn't write that gentleman's name down. I always thought I'd run into him again. I wish I'd have kept notes back then, and I didn't. I mean, we were having a good time. It was the best fellowship, one of the best times of my life. I miss those days. So, we have a statement by Jesus. You call him Jesus, I call him Yahshua. Get my Bible, you'll start using his right name. You start using God's proper name too, which I think is pretty important at this point, since you know that Gadriel is the dude that seduced Eve, giving birth, fathering Cain, who murdered his brother, half-brother Abel, who got kicked out of the garden, who took wives from among the people outside of the garden. Yes, there were people outside of the garden. And they were called Enosh or Enoshwi in the Bible. And that meant earthy man. And so he went to the land east to the land of Nod, the land of wanderers. And he took Oriental wives. He took Mongoloid wives. Nothing wrong with them. The problem was the satanic DNA, that fallen DNA from his father Gadriel. And then those children that were mixed ended up going and settling in the land of Canaan. They became the Canaanites. So why is the United States of America going to disappear? Well, we're the real deal. When our nation was founded, we all read the Bible and knew the Bible. It was our first book. We knew it pretty much inside and out. We were far more intelligent back then. And if you don't think what I'm saying is correct, that we're more intelligent today because those people didn't have smartphones, they didn't have computers. How can you say that, Dr. Kent, that they were more intelligent? How can you say such a horrible thing that we're dumbasses? Because you are dumbasses. And I too was a dumbass till I read the Bible. I had 5 degrees and didn't understand jack. Didn't understand the world the way it is. Didn't understand the reality. Now I see things pretty clearly. And of course, you folks want to mock me and call me grandpa. Well, you know, if you're lucky, you might reach my age. A lot of people didn't make it this far. I mean, I'm just amazed at the people that died that I knew that never made it to age 30. I think about one young guy in particular who was a pretty good-looking guy who was a bodybuilder. He overdosed a long time ago. Of course, that's probably the major death mode today. There's probably 100,000 of us dying a year, more than 100,000 dying a year from overdoses. And in case you're wondering, that wonderful medical profession that you worship, that you treat as God and gods, they're killing most of you. That's right. 500,000 Americans die annually, at least that's the way it was before they brought this pestilence upon us, this man-made pestilence, this bioweapon, before they decided to wage this war against us and genocide us. And by the way, that's coming from inside the country and around the globe. They're working with the Chi-Coms. It's the elites here, right here in the United States. It's Mr. Gates, Bill Gates, the gates of hell, and his cohorts. Anyway, what am I trying to get to? There's several reasons why we're going to disappear. And I was telling you about the exception to the rule that Unwin had discovered, the axioms that he had discovered, the principles. Number one, that once female sexuality became unbridled, that civilization was doomed and disappeared from the face of the earth. It didn't last much longer. So we have that going on in the United States of America today. The other that he came to the conclusion was that once that occurred, you couldn't put the genie back in the bottle. And I'm here to tell you, I believe that Hitler actually put the genie back in the bottle. He succeeded in putting it in the bottle. However, another friend of mine pointed out that Adolf was done in by a woman. He's older than I am. Doesn't get out of the house much. He's a decade older. And he's read more versions of the Bible and understands it better than anybody else I know. He's self-deprecatory, whatever, derogatory. He's a humble man. He's not educated, but he's educated himself. He's done so much reading, collected so many Bibles. When I wanted to find a different version of the Bible or a modern English version of the apocryphal books, he gave me the best recommendation. So he can explain the differences in the Bibles to you. That's pretty educated to me. Now, he was hanging out with retired German officers in the States who were having annual conventions, and he went over to one in Ohio, since he lived in Indiana. He was fluent in German. He loved the old German songs. He loves to drink and sing Wagner. I mean, he loves that stuff. And of course, I'm like, man, that's not my type of music. Of course, there's worse music than that. There's Weber, and there's the modern guys who are really off the wall as hell. Sounds like it came out of hell. It's very highly organized, so you have to damn near be educated to like it. It's different. He attended one of these conferences hanging out with the retired German officers, and they got to know him pretty well. So he got to know them well enough so he could ask them questions, and they were talking to him. And he asked this one older gentleman, how could you guys lose the war? How come you lost the war? He understood that the German war machine was so well put together, so well thought out. Their science was so much more advanced than ours was. Their weapon system were so much more advanced. And they were so disciplined. They planned things. They were more logical. They're actually more innocent and more honest too, by the way. I discovered that as a little boy living in Germany. Hell, they ratted on themselves all the time. They were better than we were. Look, I was a youngster. I was 7 years old, 8 years old, and 9 years old. And I was told about the boogeyman, the German boogeyman, and I get there and it wasn't like that at all. So my perspective is a bit different than yours is. Adolf Hitler put the genie back in the bottle. And that society came around, and it was flourishing. It flourished so well they could put together that war machine. And that, by the way, was done in self-defense. Why? Why did he have to defend himself that much? Because a group declared war against him before he took office. Before he got into office, they declared war against him. I don't understand why they did that. They targeted him. But then, when it comes down to it, you got this banking group, these guys that own the banks that are around the planet, that come from Nathan Rothschild, his 5 boys. You've got them working in the background to manipulate things to make these wars happen. And they're doing a good job right now. They're going to get the United States of America nuked. That's what they're trying to do. They set up these countries to go to war against each other, and then we say no more brother wars because it turns out we're fighting our brothers, and they sit back while we kill each other. They manipulate the rest of us. They're a bunch of liars and thieves. And so they wage war by deception, and they get us into these wars that we shouldn't have any business with doing at all. And so that's what's going on in the Ukraine. And so they're on both sides. In order to make these things happen, they got to control all parties. So they controlled Saddam Hussein and got that war going pretty well. They control the United States of America. They control it all. So, you want to know about the 10 Commandments and the deal we made at Mount Sinai? Remember Exodus 20. And I've got those marked off in my Bible here. I'll show it to you. Okay, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. And I continued on the next page. I thought it was important to give them numbers since the Bible didn't quite do it. Okay, where are we at? We're over here. All right, the others are at the end. In case you're wondering, I think the first 4 of these, or 5 of these, first 4 of these have to do with our relationship with Yahweh. And the last 6 of them have to do with behavior with others. And there's some simple things here. You shall not steal. Okay? Well, if you steal, the other guy you're stealing from just might whack you. Just might kill you. I mean, that's natural law. That's what the animals will do. When one's stealing from the other one, they'll kill him. That's it. It's just survival of the fittest. And by the way, in this Bible it says, you shall not kill. Some Bibles it says, you shall not commit murder. And in this Bible, it also says, you shall not commit adultery. And people don't understand what that means. Most of my life, I thought it meant that you don't cheat on your mate. You don't cheat on your spouse, your partner. Well, that's the simple meaning of it. But the real meaning is you don't adulterate, you don't water down your genes, your genetics. You don't marry outside of your kind. And there's good reason for marrying in your kind. It gives you stability. It gives you adhesion in the society. You understand the social contract. You understand the psychological contract. You understand what's expected of you, and it's easier to live by that. It's understood, so people get along better. The rules of society are respected more. The rules of interaction are better. Well, Adolf Hitler come along, and there was this group in Germany that had taken over the place pretty much, the Weimar Republic, and they debased the currency, which is what's happening in the States, and they also debauched the people, which is what's happening in the United States. Only this time they're going much slower. So they figured out that if you boil the frog too quickly, he might jump out of the pot. He might discover what you're doing and resist. So they're doing a real slow boil on this population because they don't want to get caught. And they are here among us, and they are spoilers. However, they fear too many of us are waking up to the reality and discovering them. And they know that if we wake up to them, that we can shake them off like fleas, like the parasites that they are and the minority they are. Please don't go saying it's the Jews. I mean, it would be nice if it was something so simple as that, but it's not. You need to understand that those people have been used as well. And there were good ones and bad ones. And Isaiah writes about good figs and bad figs. It's in the Bible. I guess the main thing that you need to know is that what happened is that the group that carried the satanic DNA, the Canaanites, the descendants of the Canaanites, and Esau took 2 Canaanite women to wife, and that's in the Bible proper. We've got good evidence on that. It was his children. Those are the brightest of the devil's children. Now you have to remember that there were a third of the host of heaven, a third of the angelic host were cast to the earth or left their first estate, whatever it was. And that's a lot of angels. And the number is 200 of them. The Bible just has the story of one of them. So you've got another 199 angels who are going into women and putting their satanic DNA around the planet. And so they're up to mischief as well. So if you think that it's just one group on the planet, no. The angelic DNA has been passed all over the place. You blacks out there may think, well, I'm black, I'm Negro. I don't have any of that in me. Well, the problem is that, yeah, you do have some of that. Some of you do. But some of you actually got Israelite DNA in you as well. We're that intermixed at this point. We're that intermingled. Remember the mingled peoples in the Bible. The mixed multitude is an important reference. Okay? And the mixed multitude came out of Egypt, by the way. And at this point, our enemies have mixed up the United States of America on purpose. And they continue to mix us. That's the purpose of the invasion, to dilute us and water us down, to take our strength from us so that we can't fight against them. We can't even raise our heads up against them. And it's that bad, most of you don't know right from wrong. Well, you should know it in your heart by now. But most of you don't know the story that's in the Bible. You need to read it. You need to understand it. It's the foundation for Western civilization, the basis for Western civilization. It's been misused. I don't deny that. Been a lot of wars done over the Bible, but more so over the other religions and how ugly they were. So don't be too ashamed of your heritage and your inheritance. When Columbus came to the New World, one thing he stopped was human sacrifice. So, I mean, as bad as you want to make him out to be, they stopped a lot of the human sacrifice that was going on. Pretty savage over here. They were doing human sacrifice down in Mexico. It was their high culture was doing that stuff. They considered it an honor to be sacrificed. Can you imagine being brainwashed that much that you want to die? You're willing to die for no cause at all. And of course, all of the different religions they built upon that, you had to make a sacrifice to keep the sun god happy. Well, in case you're wondering, the sun, which is responsible for all life on this earth, also controls our death as well to a very large extent. And we are about due for another micronova. I think that's about 11,800 years. Don't hold me to that. We say 10 to 12,000 years this thing happens, and we're due for it. You know, in case you're wondering, this isn't the end of the world. It'll be the end of the world for you and I, perhaps. For most of us, maybe even. It has been that violent and vicious in the past. I believe that every fifth one of these occurrences is massive in its volcanic activity, and we end up with a black basalt rock layer that's in these mountains. And you'll notice that there's 5 layers, or 4 layers and 5 layers, maybe 6 layers. I haven't counted them, but y'all should count them. You'll see that there's 5 layers, I believe, 4 or 5 layers of limestone, white rock, sandstone, and then there's a layer of dark basalt rock. Well, that's the real big destructive time. And we might be due for that. And then I have a friend who teaches the teachers. Now, he's had a pretty rough life. I met him this summer and heard his story, and he had a really bad childhood. He did get himself into the Bible in a deep way, maybe too deep, but he has come up with the fact that there is an event that occurs on a regular basis that has to do with the Messiah. And so we might be due for that sort of an event at this point. He says it happens every other cycle. I don't know. And I think it's called Orpheus or something like that. It's something that I need to look into. He's been in dire straits, and he's had a rough time with his life this summer. I've got to keep better track of him. I think he's landed on his feet again, but very, very disrupted life. Folks, we are in violation against most of these 10 commandments at this point. And as a result, we're going to suffer the curses for disobedience, or we're suffering those. And one of those things is that when you obey God, you are the lender. And when you disobey God, you are the borrower. So that's what's happened in here. So imagine that. We are now the biggest debtor nation ever in the history of the country. The bad guys have taken us captivity, basically through their Babylonian money magic. And so they've turned us into, and there is no money. They've stolen that all. They give you this fiat currency. I don't know if I have this marked, but I'm going to thumb through this and see if I can find it. My original Bible that I originally read was an NIV Bible. It's a study Bible from 1983. I went to a Bible school for a semester and didn't do very well there. They didn't give me very good grades, and they didn't like me very much. And the pastor and his wife they weren't nice people. They put on the show. And I less than optimal experience there. They had a bad reputation anyway. So, I'm trying to find in Deuteronomy and Leviticus, there are two passages about the same, and those are the blessings and curses for obedience to the Bible. And so it's going to be in Leviticus first and then later in Deuteronomy. I don't think I'm going to be able to find those. I don't think I have read this Bible enough and marked it up enough. I've got the 10 Commandments lined up. Basically, you're going to say, well, we can't live by those. That's too hard-ass. It's too tough. Well, it's true. It's hard to live by them. There's no doubt about it. And the hardest thing is that at one time or another, you'll find that you have a choice. Which commandment are you going to obey? At some time, you're going to be in a bit of a quandary, wondering, what do I do? Do I do this or do I do that? And that's pretty rare. And so that takes a lot of thought, a lot of prayer. And that's why you want to have salvation, so you can build that relationship, so you can have the best life you can have on this planet at this time. I'm not going to be able to find that. That's okay. I need you to understand the curses for disobedience are twice as long as the blessings for obedience. And when you read through the curses for disobedience, you are reading through the United States of America today, because we're suffering those curses. And some of this stuff is pretty obvious. We've become a communist nation. Every one of those planks that are part of the Communist Manifesto, those 10 planks, every one of those is operant in our nation today. They centralize stuff so much. And so a lot of you want to keep it that way. And I think that if you really want to get your freedom back, or your rights back, actually, then you need to decentralize power. And in case you're wondering, this banking system is set up to rob us of everything. You are required to repay with interest, but that interest doesn't exist, if you will. So, they put so much money into creation, phony money. Say they put $100 into creation, and you got to pay them back 5% interest. So you got to pay them $105 back. Well, if all there is $100 available in society, how are you going to give them back $5 more? $5 that don't exist. And so it's set up to rob you. It's set up for failure. We need to live according to the biblical principles. There are biblical principles for forgiveness. There's biblical principles for the ownership of land. By the way, our nation was founded upon that, but it's one of the most remote things. You'll never hear about patented land. Have you ever heard about patented land? Patented land means you have full title, above and below, all rights. It can't be attached. And as a result of that, the bankers will not give you a mortgage on it. So the bankers were really kind to us. They gave us a title. How sweet of them. How wonderful. They gave you a title to the land. And then I guess the theft wasn't adequate enough. So in 1933, when they bankrupted the entire nation and put us all up for collateral and all the land up for collateral, they decided they were going to issue certificates of title. Not titles anymore. You get the certificate. Now, my family was given a land grant from the king, and it was patented land. And unfortunately, my immediate ancestors and family did not realize, and nor did I realize, the importance of that. Because with patented land, it was like the land given to your family in Israel. That's where this come from. And the land in Israel had to get returned to the family every 7 years, or every jubilee, whatever it was. There was a specific formula for that. So, and we've lost that. So you wonder who you are, or who we are. Well, we are Israelites. The Israelites were dispersed across the world about 650 BC. About 722 BC, the Assyrians went in and started pulling them out of the country. And they were in captivity for quite a while. And when they got the signal that they were free, and they had beaten the Babylonians, by the way, the Israelites, along with the Medes, defeated the Babylonians. Then we took our leave and bolted across the Caucasus Mountains. That's why we're called Caucasians. And we went into Europe and into other lands that had not been inhabited by Caucasians. Yeah, God decided to have a family on the earth, and we are his family. And I know a lot of you out there, not a lot, but some of those listening are going to say, my God, this guy's racist. He says we're not God's children. We're not part of the family. Well, that's true. And if we read the Bible carefully, we'll see there's different words for men that have been translated all as men. There are separate words that describe the different populations. And the word was not Gentile, by the way. Gentile is a Latin word. What's a Latin word doing in a Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic Bible? Ha! Yeah. I don't quite understand that one. Pastor Jerry Wiki says it's from the Latin word gentilius, meaning non-Roman citizen. And that got put in the Bible somehow. There's a lot of confusion over this stuff. I wish I knew the Bible better. I haven't been reading it enough lately. That's my problem. The United States has been scheduled for destruction by the elite that run the world. Those secret powers that are behind the scenes decided several years ago, and they announced at Bilderberg that America was going to be coming down. They were targeting America, and the crowd cheered. That's the report from about a year ago, 10 years ago. It's getting close to 10 years ago. And they screamed, let's give the Americans what they got coming to them. So I think these people take turns setting up their nations and taking them down, because they're the internationalists. They're the ones running the show. And in order to stay in power, they got to keep the rest of us fighting and divided and not let us unite and discover who they are and get rid of them. So in case you're wondering, the Ukraine's pretty interesting. And I'm learning more. I learned more earlier today on Facebook, of all things. There was a meme out there, and the Ukraine has got a new symbol. And I looked carefully at the symbol, and the amazing thing is it's the symbol of ancient Khazaria. Okay, fine. And now there's a third symbol. It's the symbol of Molech. So these people really worship the devil. It's the same damn symbol with a little bit of variation in it. And I saved that photograph this morning. Oh, I'm in Facebook jail again. They always want to take me out before the election because they know that people pay too much attention to me. I didn't realize it was a symbol of Molech as well, their god. Molech, the one that they sacrifice children to, the one they burn children to. You want to see something weird, go look up 1933 on Soldier Field, Chicago. There was a ceremony to the god of Molech in which they sacrificed a child. Now, my farmer friend doesn't think it was an act. He doesn't think it was a symbolic burning of a doll rather than a human child. He thinks it was the real thing. And they filmed that in black and white on Soldiers Field in 1933. And it was a crazy group of more than 100,000 people. I believe it was in the month of July on a Monday. And they did that at night. And this giant calf god, half man, half calf, half beast, half man, They pop open or drop that chest open like it was a drawbridge. It opens up, and there's fire inside, and they take the baby and put it up on that platform. I don't know if they close it up or what they do. They didn't film it that much, and I really didn't want to watch it that much. It bothered me that much. Now, the people that had that ceremony on our land need to give us an accounting. Did they really burn a real baby? What the hell were they doing with that ceremony on our land? I think they were basically declaring this land the land of Molech. And in case you're wondering, they got the rest of us thinking that abortion's okay, baby murder, child sacrifice is okay. That's their number one right. And they fight like crazy to keep women's right to choose. When are we men going to have rights? I mean, the women claim it's their bodies, their choice, and they want the power. The power to murder our children because it's not entirely their bodies. Yes, we may have a small contribution to make. One cell, but that's all they're making too. As far as I can see, it's supposed to be a team effort. It is a team effort. And sure, we can't bear children. They can. And we can't have children without them. So when is a man going to be able to walk into court and say, Your Honor, I want the child. I don't want her murdering my child. I want the child. I want a court order. She has to take this child to term. Once it's born, I want it. I'll have it. I'll take it. I'll raise it without her. We men don't have any rights. Isn't it so weird that this civilization is coming down because of the change in social mores? Isn't it so weird that there's so much disorder, so much confusion? And by the way, the book burnings that the Nazis did, yes, I use that word, I know I shouldn't. But that's what they were accused of being, was Nazis, and they were accused of book burning. Boy, I mean, the way they described it, you would think that they were burning the Bible. Guess what they were burning? The first books they went after in Berlin when they had the book burnings were by a physician named Hirschfeld. I think I got that right. He was a doctor. And what did he write about and advocate as a scientist? Transgenderism. That's what they burned first. So they were dealing with wokeism. They were dealing with wokeism back then. And we're dealing with it. And they're doling it out nice and slow, and they're in power. And we got a bunch of dumbasses who think that they're law enforcement, who don't know anything, who don't have good understanding as to what's going on. So they're just going to follow orders and shoot the rest of us like they did, like the police did, opening fire on their own people in South Africa. That's coming here to the United States as well. You see, folks, as these sociopaths grow up and get older, they hone their craft more. They get better at their craft. They get more deadly. They become much more effective, and they become harder to detect. And we are at the point where their craft is very well honed. We are at the end of the Earth Age. And the Earth's children are weaker towards the end of the Earth Age. That's in the Apocrypha, which should be in the Bible, which we dumbass Protestants took out of the Bible. That's in 2 Esdras. I think it's 2. Could be 1 Esdras. Esdras, same as Ezra for you in the mainstream Bible. Folks, I'm not very happy with my announcement, but you've been scheduled for termination. This country is scheduled to be taken apart. If we read the Bible carefully enough, and you can go to YouTube, Rex Tibosaurus, I think that's his name. The guy from Sniper 101, the gentleman from the Dakotas. I think he's from South Dakota, could be North Dakota. He's out there on the fringes somewhere anyway. Yeah, I know. He thinks a little differently than most of us do. He's really schooled in the Bible quite well. He's got a 3-part Bible study up there, and the question he puts up for the title is there nuclear war described in the Bible 2,500 years ago? And the man did a word study, and he put things in context. He did a marvelous job. I'm not going to do it, but his video's out there for you to go to watch. He's also on Patreon and other places, so you can subscribe to his stuff. I'm on the broke side, so I don't do that, but I recommend you do that. I watched the video, and I had to put my comment up. Seems right to me because he's right. We have a nuclear war described in the book of Zechariah, and we have the rest. There's allusions to that peppered through the rest of the Bible, including the book of Revelations, including the major prophets, in which we have 2 women put into a basket. It's considered evil. There's a lead lid put on it. And he describes the fact that the lead lid, that was about the closest that they could refer to the trigger mechanisms on nukes. Yeah, he did a really good word study. He also showed you the original meanings of the terms. One of them was for a 40-liter container, if you will, like a vase or jar. It turns out that the volume for that's about the same volume for these intercontinental ballistic missiles with the MIRVs on them. I mean, he got into it, and he obviously got into it a long time ago. And so, yes, it's in the Bible. We also have the biological war in the Bible here. It's going to be so bad, people are going to be begging God for death. They're going to be praying God to please take their lives because they're suffering so much. So that's what the bad guys are up to. And in that case, it's weaponizing smallpox, from what I can tell, from what I'm able to discern. And that's probably the existential threat that Putin was trying to tell the world about. They built all of those labs on the border of his country. Why did they do that? Why does the United States of America build level 4 bioweapons labs on the border of Russia and the borders of other countries? How many of those does our Department of Defense have funded around the planet with these secret missions going on that the American people aren't aware of? And so we can't put an end to it? You see, that's probably why we're going to go, as dereliction of duty, because we don't have control over this government. We don't have proper representation. Hell, they changed the damn structure. You don't have a proper Senate anymore. So the states are not represented, and they were the parties of the Constitution. You don't have the separation of powers, the original 13th Amendment, that stripped all of these Bar Association members, which stands for British Accreditation Registry, of any and all citizenship in these United States. Now, you might think I'm down on the attorneys. I am. I, at one time, wanted to become an attorney, and my family never forgave me for not becoming one. I realized my path was quite a bit different. I'd have been better off becoming one. I'd have made more money, that's for sure. Instead, I become a psychologist. Oh, and I'm not allowed to call myself that anymore because the licensure boards have control over that. You talk about free speech. That's bullshit. Folks, we've been targeted for extermination. And we're going into the end of an Earth age, another cycle in which our sun goes micronova, and we go right into a freeze zone. We go right into an ice age. And the Earth tilts quite a bit for quite a while. And then eventually the sun puts out a flare, and the melting of the ice begins, and the Earth gets upright somehow. I don't understand that stuff, and I know that our scientists for the most part, don't understand it either, because the evil ones have been in the universities obscuring things so that we can't, so our knowledge base is off. You may think that we're the most technological and advanced civilization ever, but I can assure you we aren't. You want evidence of that? Well, there's a couple of machines that were left over from previous artifacts from previous ages, and one of those is a model of the Milky Way. I have never seen a model of the Milky Way before this year. The other one is some sort of an analog computer that's just really incredible. And there's another one beyond that that was used for navigation. And these things are just marvelous. These folks before us knew about the galaxy very much. They knew about the underpinnings of creation. They had incredible technology. Energy was probably free, which, by the way, is what we need to be going to. That way, everybody becomes a wealthy man. Everybody's lifted up. Nobody's starving. The only reason it's the way it is because the bankers control this whole damn thing. Yeah, I'm fingering them. Well, Yahshua fingered them. What did he do? He fashioned a whip out of ropes, and who did he use it on? The money changers. And he called them out and said, I know you say you are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Well, looks pretty evil, dude. Passing your children through the fire is a pretty evil thing. Burning children, sacrificing humans. It's pretty evil. So you really think that the white man is as bad as this government is telling you? You really think white supremacism is the most dangerous thing? I don't see a bunch of white supremacists out there sacrificing babies. I see some people that look like they're whites, that are hiding among us, that really are devils. What do you see?